And he also engaged in book distribution during those 10 years. In 2004, actually Maharaj used to live in Vrindavan, but in 2004, JBC asked him to come to New York City to help with the Long Island temple issue. Since then, has been living in New York and preaching in the New York and the surrounding areas. He is known for his humility. And I mean, one thing I saw that 20 years ago, I have not learned till this day, but I saw this, I was mentioning this morning, Maharaj will explain me, like for what I'm going to tell. So the festival of inspiration would happen, and people would come to Mangalarti, 100 people, 200, 300 people to attend Mangalarti. Maharaj would go to the temple. Anybody would walk into the temple, you would offer obeisances to them. A child of 4, a child of 5, a child of 6. 300 people would walk in, he would offer obeisances, 300 obeisances. How many of you like it? I saw this in 2002, 3. Ravinath Das Goswami would offer obeisances to 3,000 Vaishnavas every day, Acharya. Following his footsteps, Maharaj would do that. Anyone can make friendship with Maharaj, actually. That is his great quality. He accommodates. So, very grateful, Maharaj, for your presence, and we are blessed by your presence. So we want him to come again and again and again. And we were practicing bhakti for this years. Many of you were not born. So, but he has been practicing as well. And past few days, yesterday and today, he's imparting knowledge in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. It is the final class tomorrow is leaving. So please pray to the dear Lord Chandrashekar that he come again and again and impart us this knowledge. So Sadhusanga Sarasastra, Lavamatra Sadhusanga Sarasastra. If we get the association of 1/11th of the second of prayer, so 1/11th second of association, it will open the doors of liberation. So thank you much for coming. Very grateful. This is Chandrashekar Swami Maharaj ki Jai. Jai.
And may I request everyone to please put their cell phone on silent, that's okay, so that we don't disturb the class. Thank you.
I'm using up all the flowers. I'm using up all your flowers here in farm. It's nice and forth go.
It's been a lot of fun.
Next time I'll keep my garden. So you'll have some flowers left for something else.
Yes.
Jai Ram Damadha Kunja Vihari Jai Ram Damadha Kunja Vihari Gopi Jalvala Giri Paradari Gopi Jalvala Giri Paradari Yasodanandana Vrajadana Rangana My great Stacy.
Yeah.
Anantakoti Vaishavindaki, Rajra Shrimad Bhagavad Gita Ki, Samveda Bhaktivinoda. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Grananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupaka Damayam Dati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Sri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Daham Sajivam Sadhuetam Savadhunam Harijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurani Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Niyari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasari Gaura Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Welcome to our Sunday program here at Farmington Hills. Happy you all could come and attend, participate today. How many of you are here for maybe the first or second time? Okay, so mostly we've got a lot of people who have come many times. That's good. That's good. I'm happy there are a few people here for the first time. The Bhagavad Gita is a very interesting literature. It was written 50 centuries ago, and it's part of a larger work called the Maharaj, and it's only one chapter. And what makes the Bhagavad Gita very important is that in the entire Mahabharata, which is 200,000 verses, or thereabouts, 100,000 actually, about 100,000 verses, is the Mahabharata. But 700 is this one chapter. Let's see if you can tell. The Mahabharata is a very large writing, and it has a story of ancient India. Many families lead up to the Pandavas, and the Pandavas and their competition with the Kauravas and the battle, and then what happened after the battle. But just before the battle started, that's where Krishna is discussing with Arjuna. Arjuna has asked to see both armies. And when Krishna puts the chariot between both armies just before the battle starts, Arjuna has second thoughts about the battle. Not because he's afraid of the armed conflict that's about to take place, but because he thinks that maybe it's not right to fight the battle. So Arjuna lists out his doubts in chapter 1 and chapter 2 of Bhagavad Gita. And then Krishna begins to systematically explain the nature of the universe and overturn Arjuna's reasons for not wanting to fight. And in chapter 2, we have a lot of explanation of how the body that we're in is certainly temporary. However, there is a soul within the body that is not temporary, permanent. And Krishna goes on to explain many things. And in chapter 10, which is called the opulence of the absolute, in chapter 10, then Krishna describes who he really is. So if we actually understood the nature of God, we would change our attitude. But in our modern world, most people don't have much conception of who God is. They have some idea that God is very great, he's in control of everything. A few kind of interesting points like that. But detailed understanding of God is not available for the most part. Only if you study Vedic literature, particularly Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, will you begin to learn about all the ins and outs and the mysterious abilities, the mysterious potencies, the nature of God being at the bedrock of everything. This is what you will learn in Vedic knowledge. So I chose this particular verse to speak about today. This is the second verse of the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Namevidu suragana prabhavamna maharshaya aham adir devanam maharshinam chasarvashaha. So this verse, na me vidu suragana prabhavamna maharshaya aham adir devanam maharshinam chasarvashaha. So here's the translation of this verse. Neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulence, for in every respect I am the source of the demigods and sages. I'll reread the English there, just so it makes it easier to grasp. Neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulence, for in every respect I am the source of the demigods and sages. So here's Prabhupada's explanation of this verse. As stated in Brahma Samhita, Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord. No one is greater than him. He is the cause of all causes. Here, it is also stated by the Lord Krishna that he is the cause of all demigods and sages. Even the demigods and great sages cannot understand Krishna. They can understand neither his name nor his personality. So what is the position of the so-called scholars of this tiny planet? No one can understand why the Supreme God comes to earth as an ordinary human being and executes such wonderful, uncommon activity. One should know that the scholarship is not the qualification necessary to understand Krishna. Even the demigods and great sages have tried to understand Krishna by their mental speculation, and they have failed to do so. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, also, it is clearly said that even the great demigods are not able to understand the supreme personality of Godhead. They can speculate to the limits of their imperfect senses and can reach the opposite conclusion of impersonalism, of something not manifest by the three qualities of material nature. Or they can imagine something by mental speculation, but it is not possible to understand Krishna by such foolish speculation. Here the Lord indirectly says that if anyone wants to know the absolute truth, here I am, present as the personality of Godhead. I am supreme. One should know this. Although one cannot understand the inconceivable Lord who is personally present, he nonetheless exists. We can actually understand Krishna, who is eternal, full of bliss and knowledge, simply by studying his words in Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. The conception of God as some ruling power, as impersonal mind, can be reached by persons who are in the inferior energy of the Lord. But the personality of Godhead cannot be conceived unless one is in the transcendental position. Because most men cannot understand Krishna in his actual situation. Out of his causeless mercy, he descends to show favor to such speculators. Yet despite Supreme Lord's uncommon activities, these speculators, due to contamination of material energy, still think that the impersonal Brahman is supreme. Only the devotees who are fully surrendered unto the Supreme Lord can understand, by the grace of the Supreme Personality, that he is Krishna. The devotees of the Lord do not bother about the impersonal Brahman conception of God. Their faith and devotion bring them to surrender immediately unto the Supreme Lord. And out of the causeless mercy of Krishna, they can understand Krishna. No one else can understand him. So even great sages agree. What is Atma? What is the Supreme? It is him whom we have to worship. What's that?
Take the mic a little up.
Okay. Nate vidu suragana prabhavam cha prabhavam na maharshaya aham adi devanam maharshinam cha sarvashaha. Neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulence. For in every respect, I am the source of the demigods and sages. I guess the first sort of interesting and important point to try to come away with from a verse like this is Bhagavad Gita. This is Krishna, God speaking himself about himself. It's not somebody speaking about him. This is Krishna speaking about Krishna. And we might wonder why it is that God seems so mysterious. That in our world, there are certainly many atheist people who don't believe there's God at all. Quite a number of those, a big portion of the population, especially these days. However, among even people who do believe in God, what they know about God, he gave most people a sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11 little grid lines on the massive. Fill up everything that they know about God. Most people would struggle to fill up one page with what they know about God. And there's a reason for that. One of the reasons, of course, that in most of the scriptures of the Western world, we don't have any detailed description. In fact, mostly people are under the misimpression that God must have no form. He must be completely formless. And if God doesn't have a form, then a lot of things become very difficult. It becomes difficult to build a relationship with someone who has no form. You were going to say, here is a picture of my girlfriend or boyfriend. A picture, and there was a cloud. Well, what would you think, you know? It'd be very hard to relate to that. So we would be lost. And in fact, this is why very difficult for people to forge and to give themselves to God, because it's hard to love, it's hard to be committed to, it's hard to understand something which you suspect may not be understandable at all. Having no form really puts you at a disadvantage. If God has no form, then it's hard to get fired up about someone that has no form. And of course, one of the hidden subconscious elements to God having no form is then we wonder, well, if God has no form, why do we have so many laws this formless God has put on us? He's put all these forms on us, but he doesn't have one. So it's hard to reconcile the idea of a person who has no form being so concerned with form. And therefore, tendency is to think, well, all these religions, they have all these rules and regulations. These rules and regulations are all useless because actually God doesn't have any form. And so I can do whatever I want. And the material universe is there. As long as I follow some basic principles of being okayness, and then following this being okayness to a very careful degree, I should be okay. So this is the nature of a formless God. And we can wonder from the other side, if God is so important, then why does he create a world where most people don't have any clue about who he is or what's going on here? Why should we suppose that that happens? Let me just put that as a big thought question out there, hovering out there now. If God is so important, and we're supposed to try to understand him, why is there so little knowledge about him? And why is it so difficult to know? Why would God make it like that? Anybody have any ideas? Yeah.
It's like the sun is there everywhere, but someone chooses to go in dark, cover himself. It's his own choice. It's not that the sun is not visible to everyone, sun is visible to everyone, but someone chose that to.
Yes, yes, so everyone else can hear.
Once more. In scriptures, we hear about the sunlight. The sun is there, present everywhere, giving its light and heat to everyone. But someone chooses to cover himself in the cave and do not want to face the light. It's not a problem of the sun. We can't say that the sun is not there. It's an individual who chooses to not face the sun.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's true. What you just said is absolutely true. And in fact, that's described in Vedic literatures. But the question is, why would God make it so hard? Why is it seems like he has gone out of his way to go out of our way. So he's gone out of his way to be a mysterious person that nobody has much information about, except that we should do what he says and that he's great. You know, we know those things about him. It's great. We should do what he says, and if we do, we'll go to heaven or something like that. Good will happen. So why would God himself make it that way instead of, you know, putting big billboards all around, you know, everywhere, signs, and this is what I look like, this is why you should do this, and making it very, very straightforward and easy? Why would it be in his interest to do that?
Because we wanted it to be like that.
Yes, That's exactly the reason. It's not because he wants it that way, because we want it that way. That's why we don't know anything about God. It's not because it's the way he wants it, but he knows that's the way we want it. So why is that? Well, of course, the answer is that we all are little miniature gods. So we have come from the spiritual world where there's one God, and he is obvious. In the spiritual world, there's no getting around Krishna. He's front and center of everything. He's the center of everything everyone does. He's the center of what everybody plans about. He's the center of every emotion, every activity. But we don't really want to always see somebody else in the center. Sometimes we want to be in the center. Then you've come to that funny place where, yes, you can be at the center. At least you can pretend to be at the center. You're not really at the center, but you can pretend. And if you're very intelligent, very powerful, maybe you can convince a few other people that you are in the center. So this place you can do that. And for you to be at the center, God has to be out of the picture. And so he says, all right, I'm out of the picture. I'm hiding. Where is he hiding? Hiding inside the walls. He's hiding in the floor. He's hiding everywhere. He's hiding so well that nobody finds him. And you're walking down the street and you think, where is God? Actually, he's everywhere. He's in the trees, he's in the ground, he's in the deity, he's in other people's hearts, he's the air we breathe, he's everything. But we don't see him anywhere. So there's a story that there was a great demon, and his name was Hiranyakashipu. And he was terrorizing everybody. And his brother was killed. Hiranyaksha was killed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Hiranyakashipu wanted to find Krishna or Vishnu and kill him. So Vishnu hid in the one place he knew Hiranyakashipu would never look, and that was in his heart. He knew that Hiranyakashipu would never look there. So everywhere he looked all around, he couldn't find God. So he thought, well, I can't find him anywhere. He must be dead, or he disappeared, or whatever it is, you know. So, and it's that way with us as well. God will remain a mystery unless and until we decide we're serious about learning something about him, unless and until we decide we want to know something about him. But if you really want to still be the center of things, at least in your own little plan of the world, you know, we all have our little God project. We're God here and trying to prove to everybody that more or less that I'm that's God and not you. So we have this little project and we're trying to find ways to demonstrate how amazing and awesome we are, powerful, wealthy, how intelligent, how talented, how famous we are. And in this way, we think, oh, my God project is at a 5 now, and if I keep going this way, it'll go up to a 6 and maybe a 7, you know. And we're constantly thinking like that. And as long as we think like that, the actual God will say, all right, I'm hiding out of the picture, so you aren't, your little parade won't get any rain on it. You won't be able to think that way. And therefore, we live in this strange, funny world where God is everywhere, but he doesn't look like he's anywhere. Where God is behind everything, causing everything to happen. But it all looks like it's happening by random chance, by various mechanistic, mechanical, scientific principles. That's all that's really happening. That's the way it looks. And as long as you want to play the game and be your own little God in your own little mind, in your own little backyard, sipping your own little lemonade, straw, in a hammock, as long as you want to be that person, then Krishna won't interfere. He won't get up and show you that actually you're not God, but he is. And so some of us like that. We like that situation. But the problem with that attitude is that then we have to continue to live in this world that's half real, where things come to an end suddenly, where we strive very much to be happy, but instead we discover we get more and more frustrated as the years go by. We find that we make plans. Sometimes those plans turn out 25%, 30%, maybe even if we're really lucky, 50%. And still we're not happy. We see ourselves in the mirror and gray hairs start to pop out here and there. We see that as I like to say, that as one gets naturally older and their medical knowledge automatically increases, people begin to recognize various things not working quite the way they should work. And this is, of course, an indication that as time goes on, more things will not work exactly the way they should work. And eventually, we're going to leave the planet. So that's the nature of this world. But I don't want to rain on anybody's parade. If that's what you want to do, go for it. It's no one's going to kick you out of here. You can continue doing that lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, and Krishna won't really bother you. Every once in a while, Krishna is going to show you that you're not God, but he'll back off after a while. So if you're really persistent, you can continue in that illusion, and you can do it lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. It's only until you come face to face with how empty this strange virtual world is, how it's full of things and it's full of people, but what it's not full of is actual substance or any kind of what is called in Vedic literatures as rasa, as taste. So we're really looking after some kind of reason to live, some kind of taste, some kind of importance in our lives. And as long as we're playing this game of, this is my little God project is at a 5 now, I want it to get to 6. This is my plan of how I'm going to escalate from 5 to 6. I'm going to do this and this and that. And as long as we're lost in that, then nothing's going to change. We're just going to get older. And as you get older, more and more of your plans fall apart, because as your body gets old, your plans for happiness become much, much, much more difficult to work out. They don't work out so well. So if we want to know what's really going on, then we have to change our attitude. However, if you want to know what's really going on, you don't have to try to approach the Vedic literatures. You can guess. And lots of people do that. Or if you're not a very good guesser, you can read a book by someone who is. And they can guess about what's going on here. And so there's lots of speculative books about what may be going on in the world. The Big Bang, and maybe there's another big friends, and maybe there were 2 brains that came together, and something popped out, and eventually it'll crunch back down. And we have various particles and they're moving, and we have all this dust and it clumps together and becomes suns and explodes and planets come out, all this kind of stuff. You can, and it sounds interesting, but it doesn't solve any problems. And the world is still as empty as it ever was. Because these are all speculative understandings. Now, this world does have its systems, its mechanical systems for going from time A to time B. You know, does change in certain ways. That's there. But that doesn't help us to understand who we are. So you can try to learn something about God, or you can guess about God, or you can read books by people who are guessing about God, or you can read books by people who say there isn't a God. And you can also read books by people who say God has no form. So all those are possible. And because Krishna is not really forcing himself on anybody, then you can go on like that. You can go on. But if you want to know something about God, you have to change your basic attitude. The basic attitude is, instead of competing with God, you have to say, all right, well, instead of competing with you, let me understand who you really are. And if I really could understand how amazing you are in so many different ways, I could develop an attraction for you, a love for you, and I'd want to serve you. And that's why Krishna is explaining this opulence of the Absolute. Why is the Supreme Lord so opulent? He's opulent in a way that none of us can ever hope to be. You know, Parasara Muni explains that there are different opulences: wealth, fame, knowledge, renunciation, beauty. So all these 6 opulences, they are had to some extent by individual people. So you'll find some people who are very wealthy, but nobody has all the wealth. And you'll find some people who are very beautiful, but usually people who are beautiful and wealthy are not necessarily the same category of people. So some are beautiful, some are wealthy. Then we have people who are famous. So some people, usually people who are very wealthy, are also famous, but they don't have all the fame. Then if we ask about intelligence, then sometimes people who are very wealthy are intelligent, but usually not. And certainly people who are very intelligent are usually not very wealthy. So you can notice any faculty in any college, oftentimes they're not among the highest earning members of our society. So they may be very intelligent, but they're not quite so wealthy. So it's hard to have all these opulences. Then we can talk about strength. How strong are you? So it's rare to find a person who's strong, wealthy, famous, beautiful, intelligent, and final one, renounced. So how many people are renounced? If you take most of the people who have these other opulences, wealth, fame, strength, beauty, and knowledge, they wouldn't be renounced. They would be trying to enjoy whatever they have. So Krishna has all of these, and therefore Krishna is called Bhagavan, the possessor of all opulences. So Krishna has all these opulences, not just a little bit. He has them completely. He is the owner of everything. Not many people can make that statement. He owns everything. He's the most attractive. So everybody is attracted by Krishna, provided that they're don't have their heart against him, set completely against him. Then he is the most famous. We're talking about Krishna. The stories about him are written about in the Vedic literatures 5,000 years ago. So we're still talking about. There's nobody like that. that we're still talking about as an important figure 5,000 years after they made their appearance on this planet. And he's the most knowledgeable. Here he's speaking Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna has all these opulences. And if he's going to be beautiful, he has to have a form. And so we have some indication of what Krishna's form is. We're not making it up. So although in many religious circles, there is no form understood for God, in the Vedic literatures, this is not so. We know that God has form. And we begin to appreciate his form, and we begin to learn about his qualities. And the more we learn about his qualities, the more we become attracted. And then a person with form, a person like us who also has a form, we can relate to it. It's not, you know, I have a picture of a girlfriend that looks like a cloud. You know, it's a real form. And we can become attracted to Krishna's form, to his smile, to his character, to his joking words, to et cetera, et cetera. So Krishna has these features. And again, for those that are not really interested in God, for those that are not really interested, then we don't have to worry about any of this, because we're not going to understand his form. So the qualification then to understand God is not scholarship. You're not going to be able to learn about God just by reading a book. You have to learn about God by changing your attitude and reading the right book, you know, which is changing your attitude that now I want to know something. And there's so many literatures that claim to understand the world around us. That of them, there are few literatures that claim to understand the world around us in relationship to God. But here's literature that claims to know this material world in relation to God. And now we're going to get details about God. Here, there are details. How does he do what he does? How does he create the world? What does he look like? What does he want from us? Why does he want the things that he wants from us? Et cetera, et cetera. So we begin to learn about this. And this is all the missing mysterious opulence of God. And in chapter 10 of Bhagavad Gita, the opulence of the absolute, we are hearing something about that. And we learn that it's not only modern scientists and not only modern religionists, but even the demigods, even the sages, many of them also don't know about God. Why is that? Again, unless and until you are serious about learning something about God, unless you're serious about it, then God is going to stay out of your way. He's not going to interfere with your minute independence. Your free will be untrammeled. You can think whatever you want. However, whatever you do think will have consequences. But you're able to do and think whatever you want. You can think the dumbest, wrongest things you want, just fine. You'll have consequences as a result of those things, but you're allowed to think them. And Krishna's not going to force himself. But when you decide to change, to try to become focused on God, at that point, then gradually knowledge of God can develop in your heart. And if you read Bhagavad Gita and other literatures like this, you will learn details about God and your whole life will change. All right, so I want to leave some time for questions and comments. Anybody have any questions or comments about this section that we just discussed about the options of the absolute, first two?
Question.
Thank you so much. I love that you incorporated humor into your lecture. I was really good. My question is, so you mentioned that Krishna will remain a mystery unless and until we decide we want to be serious about him and the Krishna consciousness. So my question is, how do we become completely serious? How do we remove material things from our consciousness so that we can have only Krishna in mind and then perfect the life, like perfect the goal of life in this world?
Yeah, there's a very important technique, and it's called Bhakti Yoga. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's a process that we engage in that is based on a lot of things. It's based on certain do's, certain don'ts, certain scheduling, certain reorientation of how we do what we do. So in Bhakti Yoga, we are not encouraged to put on a deer skin and go to a cave on a mountaintop somewhere and sit and om out. You know, we are not encouraged to do that. That's not Bhakti Yoga. That's another kind of yoga. So you've got to go next door from that one. Okay? It's not this is the wrong spot for that lecture. But Bhakti Yoga is the process of actually learning about something called sadhana, which means that once a person, this is my realization, that once a person discovers that Krishna is real, that God is real, and is the only thing worth trying to do something about, the only thing that's worth trying to work for in a real way. When we make that realization and we try to change our life, the first realization that hits us is that I'm so much of an addict of this material world. I am so completely sold out to this material world. I know what I should do and why I should do it, but it's just so far away. So Bhakti Yoga is kind of like what I call rehabilitation. We're learning how to come out of this addiction to the material world. And we are addicted, not just a little bit, but heavily addicted to the material world. And that's why we have so many impediments, why even we can grasp, at least theoretically, some of these principles we read about in Bhagavad Gita, etc., but to apply them is a whole different world. And so sadhana is the process of, you know, in short, kind of faking it till we make it. You know, so we are going through the motions that a person who would be a deep devotee of the Supreme Lord, we're trying to act like they would act, even though we don't have any of the internal feeling, emotion that goes with it. You know, we just have the knowledge that if we do that long enough, the emotion will gradually manifest. And indeed it does. Usually in a somewhat slowish way, but not necessarily. It doesn't have to be slow. But if we take it very seriously, the transition from being a material world junkie to being a spiritual, advanced, mature person can happen quickly. We can make that transition fairly rapidly. And it's through these things, rising early, chanting Hare Krishna every morning or every day at least, and doing service without expecting any kind of return, learning how to not be concerned for whether people respect or don't respect us, learning how to understand the material workings, how this material reality actually works. And in doing a number of these things, which are all called Bhakti Yoga, we make that transition and we start to remove those impediments. And then over time, we become more and more purified. Now, to the extent you can grasp these things, to the extent that you apply yourself to these things, to that exact extent, then you get a realization. You know, yea, tamam, pajan, tam sthaiti vachamya, so as they surrender to me, I reward them accordingly. So you surrender a little bit, you get a little bit, of realization. You surrender a little bit more, you get big more realization. You surrender a lot, you get a lot of realization. So it works like that. So you, according to your intensity and focus, is how quickly the process works. And it's something that anybody can do. You don't have to be a saint. You don't have to have started off as some kind of spiritual whiz kid. You can come from anywhere. You can even be somebody who was very sinful, someone who had a very dark past. And if you engage in spiritual life through the process of bhakti, your heart will be gradually cleansed, and you have just as much a chance as anybody else. So that's the nature of the process of bhakti yoga. So we are addicts to the material world, but we can rehabilitate ourselves, and we rehabilitate ourselves through this process that we call bhakti yoga. And we read about it, all these different 9 processes: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Nidam. So we have hearing, Shravanam, Kirtanam, chanting, Vishnu Smaranam, remembering, Padasevanam, offering service to the lotus feet of the Lord, Archanam, doing deity worship, Vandanam, offering prayers, Dasyam, becoming a servant, Sakyam, becoming a friend, and Atmanam, giving everything to Krishna. So these 9 processes are nicely designed because our minds, especially in this Kali Yuga, are hard to stay focused on anything. So the process of sadhana or bhakti yoga is so nice that we don't have to do the same thing all day long. We can do different varieties of bhakti yoga. You know, we can chant at one time, we can sing at another time, we can make prasadam at another time, service at another time, we can hear a lecture at another time, we can do something else. So we can segue from one type of activity. But the difference is all these activities are not just ordinary activities. These are activities that are designed to reconnect the mind to the service of God. And then as we go on, we become more and more purified. Is that?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for so many wonderful classes. One is my question was, how do we encourage and inspire ourselves to read more scriptures and be absorbed in the scriptures, not reading superficial?
Well, there's probably good answers to that. I know the way that I did. It may not work for other people, but one of the things that really inspired me to read was to have to give classes, because when you get up and you have to give a class, you don't want to look like an idiot, you know? So when you're giving a class, you try to read something so that you'll be able to speak something and people say, what's that guy talking about? So it kind of puts you on the spot. And then immediately when you're giving a class or you're speaking to other people, you realize what you don't remember. You know, that's the first thing that always hits you. You're speaking about something, well, what's that? Well, I'll just gloss over it. I'll speak about something else. So this is a good impetus to, and I think that in general, devotees should be giving at least micro classes to each other, you know, in some kind of setting where they get together and as a group, one person becomes, okay, today they're going to speak at least for maybe 15 minutes or whatever it is. And then when you speak, you try to formulate in your own mind what you just read. And it's said actually through learning that person who just reads something retains about 10–15% of what they read. A person who reads something and then has to physically do it. In other words, that once you read it, you have to apply it in some kind of practical way. Then such a person gets more like 40, 50%. But a person who reads something and then has to teach it to somebody, that person retains far more of what they have to do, because there's much more work upstairs to be able to remember something, read it, and be able to not only explain it, but to maybe answer questions about it and feedback on it. So this is partly the way even modern educators talk about the process of learning. So this is why I think that that's a good technique for encouraging reading, if you do that on a regular basis. I think nowadays more and more devotees are coming together. You can do it even on Zoom or something like that, and have a short class where somebody reads something and then they say something about it and others respond. There are particular methods of doing that. I was studying one method of doing it, but there are lots of methods that one can do. And I think that it's a good way to put the finger on your own weak points, to do something that brings you to a higher level by making a focus on something. So that's one of the things I would recommend. There are probably other good ways to increase your reading as well, but that's what came to my mind.
Thanks. I really like the example you gave about Vishnu and purification. Maharaj, I have a question. So sometimes, especially at school, there's a lot of people there's a lot of contaminated mindsets and a lot of contaminated thoughts and a lot of contaminated things like that. And sometimes that it just brings down regular consciousness. And sometimes it's really unavoidable. And so in those situations, what can you do?
Well, association is a very important thing. Unfortunately, in the modern world, we can't always choose our association. There are things that are forced upon us to some extent, but internally, we can always try to focus on spiritual life. And if we do that internally, it has an effect on others, even if it's subtle. And I think in one sense that out of the things that you can do to accelerate your spiritual progress, the most important thing is to have a desire to try to give Krishna to other people. Now, you may not know how to do it, or you may not be good at it, or whatever it is, but if you pray to develop that desire, and you actually, in your mind, you don't even have to say it out loud or anything like that, you pray for Krishna to, dump some mercy on some of the people that you're with, then there's a chance Krishna will actually do it. And when and if he does it, then you can take advantage of that, because that's actually the way it is. Sometimes, you can try to communicate with people and they're like a closed book. They don't want to have anything, any kind of communication on certain topics. And of course, religion and politics are really good ways to start a fight. Excellent ways to get into a complete negative process. So that's why oftentimes it's not so easy. But if we are always praying to Krishna, focusing on the benefit of others some way or another, then Krishna will open up doorways and pathways. And if we're intelligent, we can take the indication from Krishna how to utilize a particular opportunity to help somebody or change their life in a positive way. So in this way, you can always think about Prahlad Maharaj. He's at the official Asura Kula, so he's there with Sanda and Amarka, and they're learning all kinds of nice demoniac techniques of how to divide and conquer, and how to cheat and steal, and how to become powerful, and all these kinds of things. And when, as Prabhupada puts it, when Sanda and Amarka are on their tiffin break, when they're off eating lunch, then Prahlad gathers his school friends around and he tells them all about Krishna. And they say, oh, Prahlad, we are just young boys. We want to play now. And Prahlad's about, you don't know how long you will live. He explains to them, Krishna consciousness. And eventually he influences the entire group. So in one sense, that's kind of how we are. We're in a educational institution that's designed to boilerplate us into a perfect consumer slash worker. So we're supposed to be this kind of mindless worker that works 40, 50, 60 hours a week, gets a paycheck, comes home, and then buys all kinds of meaningless things to put in their house and feels happy that that's what life is. This is how our educational institutions are, what they're trying to pump out. So we can understand that and take whatever we need to learn and not worry about the rest of it, and pray for some kinds of opportunities to be able to reach out to other people in some way. And if we look for the opportunity and we pray for people, we start off by praying for our own desire to help other people to increase. And then we pray for Krishna to help a specific other individuals. And then we may see that some crack opens up, some opportune moment takes place where we can help them.
Thank you, Maharaj. Why are we heavily addicted to this world?
I couldn't understand the question.
Why are we heavily addicted to this world?
Why are we addicted to this world? Okay, that's a good question. What is addiction? Addiction means that you do something and you like it, and you do it again, and you continue to like it, and you do it again and again, and eventually you can't not do it. You are forced to do it. In Bhagavad Gita, in second chapter, I believe, verse 62 and 63, we have Dhyayato Vishayam Sangasteshu Prajayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kama Krodo Vijayate Krodo Bhavati Samoha Samohat Smriti Vibramaha Smriti Vamshad Burinasha Burinasha Pranashyati. So, first step, Dhyayato Vishayam Pumsam, is contemplating objects, sense gratification. By thinking about something, we develop a desire for it. And that's what television, the internet does. They constantly have commercial. What's the purpose of a commercial? Make you think about something. Coca-Cola. Okay, I hear about Coca-Cola. Or iPhone. We got this iPhone. Do you have the latest version? And so we hear about it and we develop a desire for it. And then we buy it. We buy the latest iPhone, or we buy a Coca-Cola, and then we want to buy another one, and then we want to buy another one. We come together with other people who also like Coca-Cola and iPhones, and we form a club. And we get the desire to do this again and again. Now, some things are not so very deeply sinful, but at the same time, we develop from attraction comes lust. Now, lust is a heavier form of attraction. So, Dhyayato Vishayam Pumsam form. Contemplating, one develops attachment. From attachment, lust develops. So, lust means that now we gotta have it. We can't not have it. And if somebody else gets it, we get angry if we don't get ours, you know. So this is the nature of the process of addiction. So it's also explained that there is 4 stages of sinful progress. First is called the aparabdha stage, where you perform a sinful activity. You don't usually get whacked right away. The sin is registered, but you don't get a reaction right away. So that's called aparabdha. Aparabdha means it has not matured yet. So we develop a desire to commit the same sin again. That's actually one of the negative reactions, sinful action, is you get the desire to commit that same sin again, which is how addiction takes place. You want to do the same thing again. And it was bad the first time. It's going to be bad this time too. And you will cycle through doing the same bad thing over and over and over again. Each time, the aparabdha karma is getting bigger, like a big water balloon. It's getting bigger and bigger, but it hasn't popped open yet. It's just getting bigger and bigger. And then one day, too much, and it bursts open. And all this bad karma comes flooding down on you. That time, that's called prarabdha karma. It's karma that's now manifested. So we have a buildup, a buildup, a buildup. You know, in a practical example, say some kids like smoking cigarettes, so they go out somewhere, sneak around, and they smoke some cigarettes. Nobody finds out about it. First, they cough, and they find it kind of hard, and it's very unpleasant. But they get used to it after a while, and they keep on smoking. And then later on, now as a teenager, now an adult, continues to smoke. One day the doctor says, "I'm afraid you've got lung cancer." You know, so now the balloon is broken open. But it took many, many years for it to get to that point. So we're addicted because we've done the same wrong thing over and over again. Now, this also goes from one lifetime to another. When you die in this lifetime, you had certain things you really liked that were sinful, and you don't forget about those. But when you're a baby in a new lifetime, you don't remember any of that, and you are not able to focus in on that. But about the time you become a teenager, the memory of what you liked when you were in your last lifetime comes back to you. And that's why, you know, at a certain time in life, usually somewhere between the, 11 and 19, people just suddenly, I want to join the army, or I'm going to become a death metal rocker, or I'm going to, go into business. I'm going to start my own business. The details of what particular things we liked from one lifetime come to us now, finally, this new lifetime. And we pick up where we left off. So we make the same mistakes over and over again. And we follow a certain pattern. That's why for some people, some kinds of things are very attractive. And for other people, they aren't attractive at all. Some people like jumping out of airplanes, parachutes on, not my cup of tea, but some people like that, and some people don't, and so people have built these desires up for lifetimes after lifetimes, and that's why we're so addicted to them, because not only just in one whole lifetime will we done it over and over and over, but also in past lifetimes we've done it. So this is why we are so addicted. And normally this would be impossible to change. But if we chant Hare Krishna and hear Krishna's name, Krishna performs the purification activity that removes this unwanted, dirty stuff from our heart. And we finally can give up this addiction that we've had, not just for one lifetime, but for many lifetimes. I hope that wasn't too technical for you, but I just wanted to explain that also for the benefit of others who might be able to understand more about it. But essentially, that's the reason. We follow a pattern lifetime after. We develop certain habits, and those habits become addictions. And to get free from those addictions, we have to engage in the process of bhakti yoga. Gradually undo the glue that keeps us attached to a particular bad habit. All right, so I guess next thing is prasadam. Is that what happens? I don't want to keep anybody from prasadam. So thank you all for kind attention. All glories to Srimad Bhagavad Gita. All glories to Vaishnava. Hare Krishna.
His Holiness Chandrashekar Swami Maharaj. Hare Krishna. By your divine presence and all these deep inspiring thoughts.
What's your name? Surya.